In this special episode of Home Theater Geeks, I answer questions live from the chat room. So stay tuned.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
Hey there, Scott Wilkinson here, the Home Theater Geek. In this episode, I'm trying an experiment. I am going to be answering questions from the chat room live. Now, these questions really should focus on audio and video, since this is Home Theater Geeks, after all. And I hope that those of you who are in the chat room have some questions for me. So let us begin. In fact, we start with Nicholas Menard, who says, "Glad to see you." Glad to see you too. Is it normal I have to set an AV delay on my Arvolution player, mini player? It's weird. First time I've had to do that on any device. Well, no, it's not weird. It can happen with any device at any time. It depends on the entire signal chain and whether or not the audio and video are delayed by different amounts. It happens all the time. And most devices have an AV delay in order to synchronize the audio and video. So did you put that piece of equipment in your system and notice that? Then that particular player might need the delay. Or maybe it's interacting with your AV receiver or your TV. In any event, it's not weird at all. It's not strange. It's something that I have to do on some devices, absolutely. Or else it drives me crazy to see their mouths move and then hear the sound a noticeable time later, which is in the order of typically of 20 to 50 milliseconds or more. You can certainly see that. Anyway, that's not odd at all. Let's see here. Who we got? Let's see. I have a question. Byte for Byte. Good screen name. I've got an Xbox Series X and a PS5. I know that they don't support Dolby Vision for Blu-rays, but other than that, is there a benefit to getting a standalone player? I think so. Because it'll support Dolby Vision. I'm not 100% sure that those don't. I guess they don't if you have tried it and they don't. I'm not a gamer, so I don't use game consoles for playing Blu-rays. Still in all, a standalone player is designed to do one thing: play Blu-rays. And ideally, I mean, most Blu-ray players would also be able to play DVDs and CDs, audio or super audio CDs if it's a good universal player, as they're called. It'll support Dolby Vision. It will respond faster. It has better user interface typically than a game console. So there are a lot of reasons to prefer a standalone player. If you watch a lot of Blu-rays. Now, if you only watch them once in a great while, maybe it's not worth it. On the other hand, a Blu-ray player these days is going to be in the $50 to $100 range, so not that much. If you're talking about Ultra HD, UHD Blu-rays, those players are a little more expensive, but still not very much. Boy, if you could find the Oppo 203, I have mine, and they're going to have to pry it out of my cold, dead hands because it's a wonderful player. They don't make it anymore. Oppo still makes phones, but they don't make this universal Blu-ray player, which was just great. And if you can find it on eBay, it's going to cost a pretty penny because people know how valuable it is because of how good it was, and it's not made anymore. So let's see here. Novice Nick says, I've been into HT for decades, and lately one particular processor manufacturer is pushing 8K. Is it too early to be thinking about this? Thanks for the decades of information you've brought to us all. Well, thank you so much for that. I think it is too early to be thinking about 8K. I absolutely do. 4K is plenty good enough. You can't resolve all of 4K on a 65-inch screen unless you're like 2 or 3 feet from it. And you're not going to sit 2 or 3 feet from a 65-inch display. Now, the larger the display, the farther back you can be to see the full effect of 4K. But 8K, I honestly don't see it. The proponents of 8K say that, oh, well, diagonal lines are smoother, the processing gets it up to 8K, and it seems more like you're looking out a window. Well, I'm sorry. Looking at a 4K display looks plenty like looking out the window. So I honestly think 8K is kind of overhyped and not really necessary. So there you go. Ozark Chief, hey, how you doing there? Says, I've been trying to figure out if I should rely on my Panasonic UB820 disc player to upscale Blu-ray discs or set it to pass through the signal to my LG C2 OLED TV and let it upscale instead. Great question. In my brief testing so far, it seems like the picture looks better with the TV upscaling. Any thoughts on the best way to upscale? This is a great question. And it's easy to find out. Maybe you've already been doing this test, but it's easy to find out. Take a Blu-ray that you know, or maybe a scene in a Blu-ray that you know really well, and play it on the Blu-ray player. And first have the UHD Blu-ray player, in the case of this Panasonic, have it do the upscaling, watch the scene. Then watch the scene again, turning the player's upscaling off, and watch it again. That means that the LG TV will be doing the upscaling. Which one looks better? More to the point, which one looks better to you? You could try some experiments if you have a test disc, like the Spears and Munsell HD benchmark Blu-ray, which would have some test patterns on it, in particular, some resolution test patterns. And take a look at those and see which one looks better with each device doing the upscaling. This is easy to do, and it would tell you that looking at that test pattern would probably tell you more immediately which one's doing a better job. With real content, it's probably harder to tell. But if you see a preference, if you take a look at both of them with real content and say, oh, well, yeah, the TV doing the upscaling looks better, boom, you're done. That's the way to do it. Novus Nick says, they can't have my Oppo 203, no way. Yes, indeed. Ozark Chief says, I like my Panasonic UB820 player pretty well, although I've heard great things about the discontinued Oppo. Yeah, sorry to say it's discontinued, but that was the pinnacle of UHD Blu-ray players. Universal disc players. It'll play UHD Blu-ray, Blu-ray, DVD, CD, SACD, DVD audio. I have bunches of all of those. Now, there are those, Leo might be among them. We have certainly had this discussion in the past about he believes that physical media is dead, and it may be on its way out to some degree. There certainly will be no more video disc formats after UHD Blu-ray. I'm sure of that. But look at vinyl. That's still around and going strong. In fact, he's got a show coming up where he's going to be talking with someone about vinyl versus digital audio. So that's still here. I still think that UHD Blu-rays and Blu-rays have advantages over streaming. So I'm a physical media guy myself, but there isn't going to be anything past UHD Blu-ray. I'm sure of that. Let's see. Rusty Bones. Hey, nice to see you, Rusty. What are your thoughts on TCL TVs top of the line? Well, I like TCL TVs quite a bit. They are really great value for the money, and their top of the line is great. It's mini LED backlighting, which I strongly prefer if you're going to get an LCD TV. Using quantum dot technology, quantum dot enhancement film in the backlight, so you get great color. Mini LED gives you less blooming around bright objects on dark backgrounds, generally brighter. Mini LED TVs, the TCLs in particular, are going to be brighter than OLED TVs. So if you need something to combat or compete with a lot of ambient light, then an LED TV, a mini LED TV, is going to be better. I prefer OLED for the picture quality overall, in particular the black level. And the fact that you can watch it off axis and it still looks almost as good as straight on. Whereas most LCD TVs, mini LED TVs, the farther off axis you go, the worse they look. But TCL is a great one. Let's see. Ozark Chief, I have the Spears and Munsell disc. Yes, absolutely. Try that. Go look at the resolution test patterns and see what you think. John Gerard, Berkeley, California. That's a long screen name to figure out, but so pardon me for that. Scott, on my 4K Dolby Vision 65-inch looks really nice. Well, sure. I don't know what TV you have, but Dolby Vision is my preferred high dynamic range format, no question. It's common, it's used a lot, and it has metadata indicating the brightest parts of the picture and the brightest and the overall level of the picture frame by frame, as opposed to HDR10, which just has that information once for the entire program. So Dolby Vision is a lot better than HDR10 for that. HDR10 Plus has this dynamic metadata that changes scene by scene or even frame by frame. I don't remember right now. And Samsung supports that. Other companies don't, and Samsung does not support Dolby Vision. So that's why I prefer other brands. Not that Samsung makes a bad product. They don't. They make a great product. Their TVs look great. But the fact that they don't support Dolby Vision leads me to recommend other models, other makers, generally speaking. Let's see. Novus Nick says, I spin LPs daily. Where did it? Sometimes this thing just zips right past me. Also run tubes with that setup. There he goes. There I am. Yeah, okay, so you're an analogophile, and good for you. That's great. I am not. But more power to you if that's the way, if that floats your boat, Analog records, vinyl, played through tube amplifiers, preamps and amplifiers, keeping the signal analog all the way from the needle to the speakers. That is a valid philosophy. Absolutely no question about it. I will tell you this. Analog audio generally costs more money. If you have a digital system, it might be expensive at the beginning, but after a while, you can stamp out 1 million chips, and the cost per chip goes way down in that case. And so digital audio systems can be inexpensive and still perform really well. With analog, you can't do that. They are inherently more expensive because you can't churn out 1 million of them. And so they're more handmade, sort of, and it just requires more finesse. And so good analog electronics are always going to be expensive, which is one reason why the audiophile hobby is so expensive. I mean, I did a show here at Home Theater Geeks about a $1 million stereo. This guy spent 30 years building this stereo, or this system, with a turntable on a 1,500 pound bass and these speakers that were 10 feet tall, maybe 8 feet still, all analog. And he said it sounded great. And I'm sure it did. But it cost $1 million. He had to build onto his house. He had to add an addition to his house to support and accommodate this system. I have never been into that. That's just me. If you've got the resources to really go analog all the way, as I said, more power to you. Personally, I do not like vinyl for the fact that you get pops and clicks. The vinyl can be damaged, even if you treat it very carefully. It's very fragile in a way. There's more noise involved. So I prefer the cleaner digital sound. But there are many, many people who say that vinyl has a warmth that digital doesn't have. We can debate this all day, and I'm not going to. All I'm going to say is, if you enjoy your rig, more power to you. Okay, let's see. What do we got here? John Gerard, Berkeley, California. It is the TCL TV you were talking about. I don't remember the series. I don't either. I'd have to go look that up. The top of the line, I'm thinking it was the 9 series. Last I looked at TCL, I think the 9 series was the top of the line. Let's see. Nicholas Menard. Why do some studios release physical media not in the original form? No Dolby Vision or aspect ratio, or limit a movie to 66 gigabyte disc instead of 100 gigabytes when there's no technical information. Yeah, I don't like that either. I don't like that when they don't provide technical information. Now, why do some studios release physical media not in the original form? I'm not sure that's true. I would think that if a movie, let's talk about movies, was released in the theater recently in Dolby Vision or in high dynamic range, well, in the movies only Dolby Cinemas would have Dolby Vision, but they would master it for home use in high dynamic range on a UHD Blu-ray with surround sound or Dolby Atmos immersive sound. I would think that if the movie had been released long, long ago, if it was a classic movie, and they put it on a disc without all that stuff, they were trying to be purists, releasing the movie as it had been made rather than trying to enhance it with a new technology. It's the only thing I can think of what you might be talking about there. Limiting a movie to 66 gigabytes instead of 100. I don't know why they would do that either. I'm trying to remember what the Blu-ray capacity, I believe, is on the order of 50 gigabytes. Might be 66. You could get 100 if you went dual layer. But some players might balk at that. So they might be trying to make it as compatible as possible with as many players as possible. Okay. Sushi. Are you familiar with LG's B4 series OLED, specifically the 48-inch? Best Buy has this exclusive for $599. Is there something wrong with the B4? The 48-inch C4 is $899. Worth the higher money? Well, the B4 and the C4 are now, well, I guess they're 1 year old. I guess they're up to the C5 and B5. The answer is, I think that probably the C4 is worth the extra money. There's nothing wrong with the B4. The primary difference is that the B4 is probably using a lesser video processor, And the B4, I believe the refresh rate on the screen is 60 hertz, whereas I believe the C4 is 120. And having a higher refresh rate is a good thing. You might not like the soap opera effect. So if the TV has a refresh rate of 120 hertz, 120 frames per second, you're not getting content at 120 frames per second. You're getting it at 24 or 60. And most modern TVs can do something called frame interpolation. And what that means is they'll take a look at a frame, and they'll take a look at the next frame, and they'll see what's the processor, in the TV, and they'll look and see, it will look and see, is there anything moving? If so, where would it be if there was a frame in the middle of between those two frames? And it interpolates where that would be. A lot of people hate that effect. What that does is it makes motion sharper. So if there's a ball flying through the air, or a plane, or a car going down the street, or something like that, the motion, the object in motion, appears sharper. Without it, it appears blurry as it's moving, depending on how fast it's moving. So they put in this thing called frame interpolation, or it's sometimes called MEMC, motion estimation, motion compensation. And it works, but it produces this weird side effect, artifact called the soap opera effect. It makes the content look like it was shot on video, like a soap opera, hence the name. Now with TV shows, that's not such a bad, well, I should take that back. All movies are shot at, almost all movies are shot at 24 frames per second. TV is sometimes shot at 24 frames per second, sometimes at 60. If it's shot at 60, it does have a more video look. People complain about high frame rate movies like Billy Lynn's Long Halftime Walk or Gemini Man, both by Ang Lee. They were made by Ang Lee. And he shot them at high frame rates and showed them in high frame rates. And people thought that it looked artificial. Again, I'm in the minority. I liked the way they looked. I really liked the way those movies looked because the motion was sharp and the detail was phenomenal. I like it. A lot of people don't, and I think I'm in the minority, but so be it. Anyway, so if you want to turn frame interpolation off, then you don't really need 120 frames per second. You can get by with 60. But I'd rather have the flexibility, the option of turning that on if you want. Also, if you're a gamer, you want a higher refresh rate because games can go up to 144 frames per second or more. And so having that high frame rate, a refresh rate, is really good for gaming. So, I'd spend the extra $300. And the C4 has probably a better processor, which would be a good thing, which goes back to the question that was asked before about whether it's better to do the upscaling in the source device or in the TV. If you have a B4, I would guess that the better upscaling is going to be done in the source device. If you have a C4, it would be more of a question mark. I wouldn't know. It could very well be that the C4 would have the better upscaler. So that is the answer to that question, as far as I know. Let's see. I've probably gone a fair distance away. Ozark Chief says it's digital music all the way for me. Yeah, me too. Rusty Bones says, I agree on analog. Okay, don't know whether you agree that you prefer it or you prefer digital. Ozark Chief, FLAC files from Tidal. Yes, exactly. FLAC. I forget what the F stands for, but it's lossless audio coding. So here's another thing about digital audio. It gets compressed. It has to, because it's too big otherwise, certainly for streaming. So you can either compress it with lossy compression, which means you eliminate up to 90% of the audio information, and presumably that's inaudible. But there have been tests to show that no, it's audible, or at least detectable, discernible. Or there's lossless. You can compress it by about 50%, by about half, and you can regain every bit of information that was there before the compression. FLAC is that. Is that type of compression. And so I actually listened to, I use another, Tidal is one, TIDAL is one service that provides lossless audio. I use another one called Qobuz, Qobuz, based in France. They're both good. I prefer Qobuz because they tell you exactly what the resolution of the audio is on each track. I'm a geek. I want that information. So let's see here. Novus Nick says, have you seen Core DAC pricing? CHORE? No, but I'll bet you they are hell expensive. Really expensive. Michael Grove says, what do subwoofers help receivers with? Great question. Subwoofers are speakers that reproduce only the low frequencies of audio. So virtually all main speakers cannot reproduce all the way down to the bottom of human hearing range. The human hearing range bottoms out at about 20 hertz. Theoretically, it goes up to 20 kilohertz. Most of us that are older than babies can't hear up to 20 kilohertz. As we age, the top end of hearing drops. But we can hear 20 hertz. Almost anybody can, except somebody with pretty bad hearing damage. And even if you can't hear it, you can feel it. But there are so few main speakers that would be called full range speakers that can reproduce 20 to 20 kilohertz. And they're really, really expensive. Another example of analog technology being expensive, because speakers are inherently analog. So your main speakers probably don't reproduce down to 20 hertz. They might go down to 50, maybe, if they're good. So how do you get from 50 down to 20 hertz? You need to add a subwoofer, a big subwoofer. It doesn't have to be big, but a subwoofer, the driver, the speaker driver in a subwoofer has to be fairly big. They're typically no smaller than 8 inches. I've seen some at 6, but at 10 or 12 or 15 inches diameter, the diameter of the big circular driver, that can get down to 20 hertz. You also need a lot of power, because the way that human hearing works, we are less sensitive to lower frequencies. As the frequency goes down and down and down, it has to be low, it has to be louder or have more level before we even perceive it. So subwoofers often have 1,000 watts of power or more just for them. So the larger the driver, the lower it can get generally, although there are tricks on how they're designed. But anyway, it's really great to add a subwoofer to a speaker system. And most AV receivers have a subwoofer output. And what you do in the receiver is you set the crossover. And the crossover is which frequencies are going to go to the main speakers and which frequencies are going to go to the subwoofer. The THX classic crossover point is 80 hertz. So anything above 80 goes to the main speakers, and anything below 80 goes to the subwoofer. So that's they're very important. In fact, you hear of systems that are 5.1 or 7.1. That 0.1 is the subwoofer, and it's really, really important for a good audio experience With movies, certainly. There are audiophiles who believe that you should have full range speakers, that the subwoofers should be where the speakers are, and you should have two of them. And some audiophile companies make speakers with subwoofers built in. Those could be called full range speakers. There are other reasons that I don't prefer that. Primarily, it's often better to be able to locate the subwoofer, that is the source of the low frequencies, somewhere other than where the main speakers are. And that has to do with room acoustics. So if you have your subwoofers in your main speakers, you don't have any option to locate them somewhere else where they might actually perform better and you'll perceive them better. So that's why I generally don't prefer full range speakers. Let's see. Novonist says, you seem to need to listen to an actual good rig, no snap, crackle, or pop. The record is easily damaged, though. Yes, it is. And I've listened to some really good rigs. I have. I've listened to Michael Fremer's rig. I've listened to a number of others that are really, really good and cost an arm and a leg. If you treat your records really carefully, sure, maybe you can avoid the snap, crackle, and pop. But I still prefer that. Prefer digital. JC asks, what's up with the Bravia 5 disappointing ratings review? Significantly less HDR brightness than the X90L. I hadn't read that. I have to go look at art ratings. They're my favorite TV review site. I was really looking forward to a 98-inch Sony. Yeah, I don't blame you for that. Wow, that's really surprising to me, actually. Significantly less HDR brightness than the X90L, which is 2 or 3 years old now. I'll have to go look at that review. Thanks for pointing that out. The last time I looked at ratings, they had not published their Bravia 5 review yet. And I believe there was I did a Home Theater Geeks episode a few episodes ago where somebody wrote in and asked about Bravia 7 or Bravia 5. And at that time, the prices were almost no different between the two. And so I said, get a Bravia 7. Yes, it doesn't come in a 98-inch size, but it's brighter. And yes, it's a year older. I don't worry about that. And I recommended to get the 7. And so here's maybe another reason to do that. Let's see here. Remember K-Tel Records? The first play on cassette because those hit collections were not lasting on that vinyl. I sort of remember K-Tel Records. I never had any myself. Byte for byte. The issue is also with aspect ratio. Oh, good point. IMAX movies are often not released in their normal aspect ratio, but rather 2.35 to 1, which is a bummer. Dune is a good example. Exactly so. Movies that are shot on IMAX cameras for IMAX theaters often have not only one aspect ratio, but more than one. They switch between them. And the reason for that is that the large IMAX screens have an aspect ratio of 1.9 to 1, which is taller than a 2.35 to 1 screen. But that's the aspect ratio of IMAX film. And that's what even IMAX digital cameras, Alexa Arri makes those, and others probably too. And so some directors, Chris Nolan being one of them, and Denis Villeneuve, who made Dune, is another. They like to shoot for IMAX. And sometimes they do this weird thing. It's not weird, it's artistic, where they have a 2.35 aspect ratio for some of the movie, but then when they want to really impress you, they go to a 1.9. And on a giant 1.9 IMAX screen, that's very impressive. It's like, whoa. And in any other theater, it stays at 2.35 the whole time. So you don't get that wow effect. And I'm pretty sure that some discs are released of movies that are shot that way and showed that way in IMAX that'll do that. There's this program called Enhanced for IMAX that some receivers follow, and some projectors, I think, and TVs that will do that will automatically do that aspect ratio shifting. And it's a good thing if you really like those movies that are shot in IMAX. Byte for byte. Oh, we're talking about Blu-rays, triple layer, 100 gigabyte discs. Yes. But I would be willing to bet that some players don't know what to do with those. Nick Mitris says, recent 4K releases for old movies are using AI. Why? Terminator 2, most recently, was not a great 4K release. Well, that's interesting. I didn't know about Terminator 2 being released in 4K. I'm sorry that it wasn't a good release. Now, Terminator 2, I would be willing to bet was shot on film. And if so, they could have just rescanned the film at 4K and it wouldn't have been a problem. Maybe and I don't know this, but you're saying that maybe using AI to upscale, they're doing it so they have a scan at 2K 1080p for Blu-ray, and they want to upscale it to 4K. The good way to do it, the real way to do it, is to rescan the film at 4K. But maybe they don't want to go through that trouble, and they say, oh, well, AI can do it. And so AI does all the interpolation. You have many more pixels. What's in those pixels? Well, AI presumably can do it, can determine what's supposed to be in those pixels. But what if it doesn't do a very good job? Apparently it didn't in this case. So that's a bummer. I'm sad to hear that. I would rather them, especially a movie like Terminator 2, the best Terminator movie, in my opinion, they should have just rescanned the film. That's what I would have done. Rusty Bones, great question. I have listened to high dollar setups, and sometimes I wonder if the cost invested is biasing the listener. Yes, indeed. This is a very good question. If you spend $10,000 on your cables, you better damn well believe that those cables sound better than, $100 monster cables. There is definitely an element of bias here in this whole high dollar audiophile setup. There have been a few people who have done blind A/B comparisons where the listeners didn't know which was which. There's a famous story about Pair cables. There's a company that makes these really, really expensive cables, and the great Randy, what was his name? He was a magician. Somebody in the chat room will remind me. He was a great debunker of myths and fallacies. And he put up $1 million for anybody who could prove beyond doubt in a blind A/B test that really expensive cables sounded better than quote unquote normal cables. This company Pair actually started to make overtures toward trying to set up a test. But it didn't work. They crapped out for some reason. I don't remember the details. I wish I did. And so the test was never done. But it would be interesting to know. I would be surprised if there was a repeatable, reliable difference. Let's see. Mars 773 says, thank you for everything you do. You're very welcome. What do you think about Kaleidoscape? Do you think it's worth it over physical media collection? Well, that's another great question. Kaleidoscape, for those of you who don't know, is a company that makes a system that includes a very large storage device, a media server, terabytes of storage, and a player, a smaller device that plays the data from that server onto your TV. And they have a store, an online store. You can download movies from the store that are no more compressed than Blu-rays or UHD Blu-rays. They're the same quality as the physical media. And you can download any number you want. I mean, you pay for them, and you store them on your media drive server locally, and you can play them. And it has a great user interface where it puts up all the movies in a grid on your TV, and you can scroll through them and move around in them. It's a beautiful system, but it ain't cheap. It's really quite expensive. And they've made recent forays into being more affordable. Their latest media player, which is called the Strato, I believe one of their latest ones is like $4,000, and they did another one even more recently that might be even less. And but the terabytes of storage, that ain't cheap. That's called the Terra, Terra. So it's a beautiful system. It works wonderfully. It's the same quality as a Blu-ray or an Ultra HD Blu-ray, but it's really expensive, much more expensive than buying the discs. Plus, I do believe they have the extra material. One of the reasons I prefer physical media to streaming is the bonus material. Now, some people might look at bonus material and go, I don't care about that. Okay. I do. I watch the making of featurettes about a movie and the interviews with the director. I don't normally watch the movie with the commentary on. That takes me out of the movie kind of, but I do like the extra bonus materials that come on discs that you don't get from streaming. I'm pretty sure Kaleidoscape does offer you all of that material. I'm not 100% sure about that, but I think they do. Kaleidoscape is the system that is used at all the trade shows, CES, CEDIA, everywhere. When they're doing demos, they're doing it from a Kaleidoscape, no question. And Kaleidoscape is found in a ton of home theater systems, but they're all pretty high end. So, Ozark Chief, yes, Chord. I'm sorry, I should have realized Chord DAC, CHORD. He was talking about he misspelled Chord. That's a very high end digital to audio converter. Very high end and very expensive. And it's something that an audiophile would want because they can't get away. You can't get away from digital audio to some degree or another unless all you listen to is vinyl or reel-to-reel tape. There are audiophiles that still listen to reel-to-reel tape. So if that's all you listen to, you don't need a DAC. But you're going to have some digital audio from somewhere. And Chord makes some really, really high-end ones. Let's see. Byte for Byte says, yeah, I listen to Apple Music, which I assume is ALAC, which is Apple Lossless Audio Codec. Yes, that's correct. And as long as the lossless codec isn't doing anything weird, it's going to reproduce the entire music file exactly as it was originally presented. Let's see. Byte for Byte says, I prefer the UI, user interface, to Spotify, and it's bundled in my Apple One subscription. Great. good. That's good. Novisnik says, is responding to Rusty Bones. I own both, streaming, I guess, and physical media. It's a mood exhaustion thing. I'm beat and tired. Stream. Great mood and relaxing and relaxed analog. Or if I don't own it and I'm looking for some new music, I'll hunt via streaming. Okay, so you're talking about digital versus analog here. Okay. There was an experiment done, and I wish I had the link to it. I don't, but I've heard about it a number of times, where they put test subjects into an MRI machine, and they played digital music, highly compressed digital music like MP3, and uncompressed digital music. So this isn't digital versus analog, but it's similar. And they found that the highly compressed music activated the emotion center of the brain much less than the uncompressed music. And this, I suspect, might be something about what people talk about of analog sounds warmer. It could possibly be that digital activates the emotional center of the brain one way and analog another. It's possible. I don't know. I do know that there was an experiment done, and highly compressed digital music did not activate the emotional center of the brain nearly as much as uncompressed digital music. So I found that fascinating. Silvara, yes, getting old is lame. I totally agree. Silvara here says, I'm turning 45 in August. What a youngster. And honestly, other than the refresh rate differences, I don't notice much difference between 1080p and 4K. There's my point exactly. Now, if you were to sit closer to the screen, you would see a difference. But most of us sit 8, 9, 10 feet away. The average is 10 feet. And at 10 feet, you would need a screen, 100 inches big or more. I don't remember the exact number, but it would have to be huge in order to see the difference between 1080p and 4K. And 8K, that would have to be humongous. Evanescence Photography says, keep your plasma TV. Well, yes. Plasma was great. It was great. I loved my Pioneer Kuro plasma. But it would be no more than HD. More importantly, it would not have high dynamic range. And high dynamic range, in my opinion, is far more important than increasing the number of pixels. Far more important. A good high dynamic range image shown on a good HDR display, beautiful, just beautiful. So, byte for byte, I feel like the audiophiles haven't heard of the law of diminishing returns. Exactly. Here's something I've said for many, many years. Generally speaking, not strictly speaking, but generally speaking, the more money you spend, the better the quality you're going to get. Up to a point. Once you get to that point, the curve of price to performance starts to level off. And as it levels off, you can spend tons more money to get a tiny increment improvement in performance. So my recommendation overall is to find that what's called the knee point, Knee, the knee point, which is where the curve starts to flatten out. You're going to get your best value, your best bang for the buck, if you buy a product that sits near that knee point. If you can't afford that, you can go down the curve and you'll get less performance for less money. You can still find good deals, good value, but finding something at that knee point is the epitome, the optimum way to get the most bang for buck. Evanescence Photography. Do you get the sense that plasma TVs are going through a bit of a renaissance? I've decided to dump the LCDs in the house with the exception of the X90L. We learned at the beginning of this show the Bravia 5 isn't up to its brightness. Replaced with an older Pioneer. Sure, absolutely. I don't know that they're going through a renaissance exactly. And as I said before, the main problem is they don't do high dynamic range. But they sure look good. Okay, we have time for one more question. And I'm going to look at Byte for Byte. Disney Plus does the aspect ratio switch as well. I love it. If I'm shelling out good money for a disc, I should get the best experience across the board. Couldn't agree with you more, Byte for Byte. That is exactly right. If you're shelling out money, you should get the best you can for that money. Charlie White says Dark Knight Blu-ray has a variable aspect ratio. I guess that's true. That was shot for IMAX. So, yes, I will leave you with this. Getting the best value for your money is the ideal. And as I said a moment ago, finding that knee point on the graph of price versus performance is the best way to do that. But otherwise, you want to look for things like, does it change aspect ratios? You might not always know until you buy it. It might say so on the package, but if you're streaming, who knows? That's a real good question. Disney Plus, Byte for Byte says, does do that when necessary, and maybe other streamers do too. But the main thing is to just keep your eyes and ears open and learn as much as you can and listen to and watch this show for more information about all of that. And I'm dedicated to educating the watchers and listeners to this show the best I can to get the most out of their money and the most enjoyment they can out of their systems. So thanks to everyone in the chat room. This has been a really great and fun time for me, and it seems like it happened to go well, and that means I will surely do it again at some point. So keep your eyes and ears out for that. Now, meanwhile, if you have a question for me, you can shoot it my way to scott@twit.tv. I'm sorry, HTG@twit.tv. That would be the email to use. And I will answer as many as I can right here on the show. And as you know by now, all of Twit's shows are available for free on YouTube, but with ads. If you want to go ad-free, join the club. Go to twit.tv/clubtwit and join up today. Until next time, geek out.
The tech world moves fast, and you need to keep up for your business, for your life. The best way to do that? TWiT.tv. On This Week in Tech, I bring together tech's best and brightest minds to help you understand what just happened and prepare for what's happening next. It's your first podcast of the week and the last word in tech. Cybersecurity experts know they can't miss a minute of Security Now every week with Steve Gibson. What you don't know could really hurt your business, but there's nothing Steve Gibson doesn't know. Tune in Security Now every Wednesday. Every Thursday, industry expert Micah Sargent brings you interviews with tech journalists who make or break the top stories of the week on Tech News Weekly. And if you use Apple products, you won't want to miss the premier Apple podcast, now in its 20th year, MacBreak Weekly. Then there's Paul Thurrott and Richard Campbell. They are the best connected journalists covering Microsoft. And every week they bring you their insight and wit on Windows Weekly. Build your tech intelligence week after week with the best in the business. Your seat at tech's most entertaining and informative table is waiting at twit.tv. Subscribe now.